Hi, I'm Joanne Lee Cornish, body composition coach and slightly obsessed with being an outlier in midlife and beyond. I offer one-on-one coaching. I have 7 group coaching programs that I run throughout the year, and I also have a 10-month mentorship program. You can find out all about those and a lot more at my website, joannelee.com. Okay, let's get on with this podcast. Hello, and today we're going to talk about protein, but we're not going to talk about why you need more protein, how much you have to eat, and how important it is. We're going to talk about the fear of eating protein. And this is because it wasn't that long ago where everybody was terrified of eating protein. So the movies came out, Forks Over Knives and that other one, and we were told to go 100% plant-based and protein was going to give us cancer. And it wasn't that long ago. And now, the bias has changed, and I would say in a good way. But now you're being told to eat gobs and gobs and gobs of protein. And understandably, a lot of people may be doing that, but they might be nervous about that because, the script was flipped pretty rapidly. One moment you're being told to be terrified of protein, and coaches like me were just like banging our heads against the wall and, trying to swim against the tide. And now the tide has changed, which is great for me as a coach, but understandably, a lot of people are confused and maybe trying to do the right thing, but they're not really comfortable doing it. So in this podcast, I want to talk about, and forgive me if it gets a little complicated with the terminology, but hopefully you'll get the gist of it. I want to talk about where the fear came from and why it was very inaccurate. It wasn't based in reality, but let's talk about where they actually got their little slither of truth from. So again, a few years ago, something very strange happened and people became terrified of protein. So it wasn't the sugar anymore. It wasn't the ultra processed food. It was not, oh, you're sitting too long, you're inactive. The absolute laser beam focus of the fear-based marketing was protein. Eggs were villainized. Red meat was particularly some sort of moral failure. And eating enough protein, especially animal protein, was framed as reckless, inflammatory, cancer-promoting. Again, one of the documentaries that I use the term documentary loosely, Forks Over Knives, which made, very compelling arguments. These were polished, they were emotional, they were convincing, and they were intended to terrify a lot of well-meaning people into avoiding protein altogether. Now, I was coaching at this time. I've been coaching for 32 years. But when I was coaching at this time, and this was a dilemma for me, because this is where, as a coach, I have to stand my ground, and not because it's my bias, because it just, remember, I'm a body composition coach, and for body composition coach, you want to go 100% plant-based, that is not a great way to improve your body composition. But I had people coming to me and they wanted me as a coach, but Joanne, you've got to write me a vegan diet. And I'm not the best person to write you a vegan diet. A vegan's the best person to write you a vegan diet. I'm not the coach that is just going to bend my truth to fit your bias. I'm just not that person. Now, if you want to be vegan, I'm 100% supportive of that for whatever reason. I'm just not the right coach. And I'm not going to take somebody's money to write that. It's the same when people came to me like, oh, Joanna, I want a keto diet. I can write that standing on my head, but you know what? You're probably better going to a keto coach because, although I know that works, compliance is terrible. And, for the vast majority of people, it's not going to work. So, I'm not going to be happy coaching that. Anyway, let's get back. So fast forward to now, and the messaging has completely flipped. And now the very same people, we're being told, eat more protein with every meal. meal. Protein is a non-negotiable, protein, 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 protein. Now, understandably, people are confused. Now, I personally have been sitting here for a while waiting for this bias to show up because I am right behind it. It's what I've been preaching for decades. But understandably, people are confused. So again, today I want to do something pretty important. I want to explain how a small amount of science was mismanaged, it was exaggerated, it was monetarized, creating fear where none was warranted. And when they should have been talking about, the additives in food, when they should have been talking the sugar content, they should have been talking the lack of fiber and the ultra-processed food, they weren't. They were talking, and all of that was known at the time. They were talking about, protein's going to kill you. So what I want to walk you through today is TMAO, IGF-1, and mTOR. Yeah, sorry about that. Those of you, some of you know what I mean, and others are like, what? So bear with me, it's all going to make sense. But TMAO, IGF-1, and mTOR are three biochemical villains that were most often used to scare people from protein. But let's talk about the truth and why they actually, why it matters. So the most misunderstood molecule, which, you just had to scratch the surface on this one, it didn't make sense. So we're going to start with TMAO, trimethylene N oxide. You might have heard the claim back in the day, a few years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. It was not that long ago. High protein, especially red meat, is dangerous for you. It increases TMAO, which increases cardiovascular disease risk. Scary, right? You might have just heard high protein increases cardiovascular risk. But the full context was high protein, especially red meat, increases TMAO, and TMAO increases cardiovascular risk. Okay, here's what actually happens. So TMAO, trimethylene N oxide, is not something you eat directly. In most cases, it's a byproduct that's created through kind of this multi-step process. So you eat foods that contain choline and carnitine, and the gut bacteria converts choline and carnitine into TMA. Stay with me. Don't turn me off. So the bacteria converts these into TMA. Then the liver converts the TMA into TMAO. Okay? So foods that have choline and carnitine, the gut turns them into TMA, the liver converts that TMA into TMAO. Again, trimethylene N oxide, okay? This process is influenced heavily by gut bacteria and fiber intake. So let's take the first crack at this narrative. Okay. All right, so if the TMAO, especially in red meat, is terrible for your heart, well, fish contains 66 times more TMAO than red meat. 66 times. And yet fish is consistently associated with better cardiovascular outcomes. They kind of avoided that little detail, didn't they? So if the TMAO is itself the villain, then fish would be absolutely disastrous, but it isn't. So why did the original studies cause panic? So in animal studies, extremely high TMAO levels were shown to increase inflammation and potentially, because of that increased inflammation, potentially damage the endothelial lining of blood vessels. And that does sound alarming. Again, in animal studies and with extremely high TMA levels. Those studies used isolated compounds. They did not use the environment of eating, gut bacteria, fiber intake. They used isolated compounds in unnatural amounts that would not be found in usual situation. And animals have very, very different gut microbiomes. This is not the same thing as eating steak and vegetables. So here's the other irony here. And, wasn't really mentioned. You cannot oxidize fat without carnitine. So again, carnitine, choline make TMA. Well, you cannot oxidize fat without carnitine. That is why carnitine, if you buy as a supplement, they say it's a fat burner because it helps you oxidize fat. So if carnitine's so bad, because it turns into TMA, well, but it also is, it's the best supplement for its fat burner, huh? Okay. Choline. Choline is essential for liver health, brain health, and methylation. That's why we buy choline supplements. That's why we love choline. But again, oh no, it makes TMA, so it's going to, cardiovascular risk. But it's essential for liver health, brain health, and methylation. Both are heart healthy nutrients. So the very compounds that we're blaming for heart disease are required for metabolic health. The real difference between the diets that raise TMAO and those that don't is a function of fiber and gut health. And those animal studies used isolated compounds. They did not take this into account. Fiber and gut health are incredibly important. So what reduces, and this really matters, so TMAO, what actually reduces TMAO is, so if somebody is genuinely concerned about TMAO, how do we bring it down? Well, TMAO production is reduced by 60% by soluble fiber. Resveratrol, popular supplement, blocks TMAO formation. So that's grapes, peanut, red wine, if you want to go that route. Garlic, berberine, B-complex vitamins, probiotics, vitamin D are protective. But here's the big one. Cruciferous vegetables inhibit the liver's conversion of TMA to TMAO. I hope the penny dropped there. Choline, carnitine make TMA. And it's the liver that actually converts the TMA into TMAO. But cruciferous vegetables inhibit the liver's conversion of TMA to TMAO. So the issue was never a problem. It was protein without plants, maybe, but you add fiber, and you add vegetables, and it's a non-issue. And that nuance got completely, very conveniently lost. Now, this kind of, I look at this and I'm kind of thinking of the carnivore diet where there aren't any vegetables, and that's a bit not going to go there. Those carnivore coaches, I'm not sure about that. Anyway, I think short-term carnivores, fantastic, great information, etc. I don't know if it should be, I don't know why you would stay on it full time. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. That's somebody else's circus. All right, so that's TMAO. So we can see they said, oh my gosh, steak, TMAO, cardiovascular risk. Didn't mention fish is 60 times higher in TMAO. Didn't mention that the animal studies were using isolated compounds in extreme, non-realistic amounts. And didn't mention that if you have vegetables with your protein, it's actually a non-issue because the liver doesn't even convert the TMA into TMAO. All right. Now let's talk about, so that was one reason, right? And then there was the IGF-1. So IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, it's an anabolic hormone produced primarily in the liver and the muscles, and IGF-1 is essential for connective tissue, heart tissue, neural tissue in the brain. So when IGF-1 is too low, tissue degrades. Low IGF-1 is a part of aging. Tissues degrade. But this is when things went sideways. So some animal studies showed that animals with lower IGF-1 lived longer. And I had a bunch of clients pulling this one up at me that wanted to bring their IGF as low as possible because animal studies showed that the animals lived longer with low IGF-1. The researchers, they noticed fascinating in terms of the people that live past 100, And the people who live past 100 years old produce normal IGF-1, but are less sensitive to it. Well, that subtly disappeared in the headlines. And people were just trying to get their IGF-1 as low as possible. But the people that really lived the longest had normal IGF-1. They were just less sensitive to it. So suddenly the message became, IGF-1 is bad. Protein raises IGF-1. Therefore, protein is bad. That's not really how it works. So what actually raises IGF-1? Resistant training raises IGF-1 significantly. Enough protein supports the production of IGF-1, and severe protein restriction lowers IGF-1. So if we're going to go down that route, and if IGF-1 was absolutely the problem, then it would have been don't eat protein and do not resistance train at all. Compare that to the narrative at the moment, where it is, my gosh, big lifts, muscle preservation, and eat a lot of protein to support that. You see how people are confused. The conversation completely got flipped, and nobody explained the flip. Well, the flip was because the information at the beginning was highly skewed. So think back a few years, and I'm not going back that long. I'm really not. What dramatically suppresses IGF-1? So if resistance training increases, adequate protein supports the production of it, what actually suppresses IGF-1? Well, protein restriction. If you do a 12-hour, say, overnight fast, there's a noticeable drop in IGF-1. If you do a 24-hour fast, there's about 42% reduction. If you do a 48-hour fast, you get 73% reduction. So the idea that eating protein permanently elevates IG1 ignores the fact that your body naturally cycles it. So if you are nervous about this, then, a 12-hour overnight fast, so you stop eating at 6 at night and you start eating at 6 in the morning, you can reduce IGF-1 by 42%. So you can see how there's a very reasonable middle ground, but you know what? Middle ground isn't dramatic because it doesn't sell things. As a coach who kind of coaches in the middle ground, I'm not razzle dazzle, whatever. The information can be kind of just too average and normal and sensible, honestly, for most people. So the reasonable ground, in my view, is, okay, chronic protein deficiency is harmful. Let's not even argue about that. Chronic overeating without breaks is also very, very problematic. I'm not going to argue with that either. I mean, these bulking diets, can we get real on that? That's problematic. But, regular eating with moderate fasting, maybe you do a weekly 24-hour fast, or maybe you do a daily, an overnight 12-hour fast. That vastly oversets IGF-1, and that's balance. It's not fear, is it? I mean, you can still get your adequate protein intake with a 12-hour overnight fast very easily. So you see how it just annoys me how moderation and sensible behavior is always just discarded in favor of extremes. So IGF-1. All right. So the last one I want to talk about is mTOR. Now, my Muscle Month program is coming up really soon. We start on February the 16th. I'm going to touch on mTOR here, but, there's whole Zooms on this. And, if this film recording on Zoom, if this podcast is even slightly interesting, then can you imagine what a month of this information is? I mean, in my Muscle Month program, there's over 50, but I think there's 70 pieces of, pre-recorded content that you have access to for a year. So the program is a month long, but you have access to the videos and the PDFs for a year. only offer the program once a year. This year, I'm going to try and do it twice, but I can't promise it. I cannot promise it. I mean, I'm doing Muscle Month in February, but the only way I can get it done is if nothing screwed in my schedule at all during the year. And even then, it won't be back till November. So anyway, gosh, guys, if you think this is fascinating, but maybe I'll just do the program next time. So, what are you doing? What are you doing? There's an urgency about this stuff. We're going to waste another year? All right, whatever. Anyway, let's talk about mTOR. mTOR is probably the most misunderstood pathway of all of nutrition science. And good gracious, when we are now screaming about muscle loss and muscle preservation, you have to understand mTOR. And again, I can't do it justice in this podcast, but let me try and get, at least pique your interest. mTOR think of mTOR like a light switch. It's either on or it is off. Okay, there's no dimmer switch here. It is on or it is off. So mTOR is essential for muscle protein synthesis. You do not build muscle or you can preserve it if mTOR is not switched on. It's essential for tissue repair. It's essential for recovery. It's essential for muscle growth and preservation. Without mTOR, you are losing muscle. Can I repeat that? Without mTOR, you are losing muscle. I don't care about your Pilates class. I don't care about you training 5 days a week. I don't care. You're getting older every day, and without mTOR, you are losing muscle. Right? That muscle loss is directly linked to insulin resistance. If weight loss is your gig, if you want to sustain weight loss, it is very difficult if you are losing muscle. Very difficult. You want to get leaner and you're not protecting muscle, it's exponentially harder. All right. So muscle loss is directly linked to insulin resistance. And if you've got insulin resistance, good luck. Good luck even building muscle. Okay. You're going to be fragile, poor glucose control, increase mortality. It's just not good. Okay. So if mTOR is essential for muscle, how did it become a villain? Because chronically elevated mTOR without balance can be associated with aging, cancers, and cardiovascular disease. The key word there is imbalance. Now, I did a podcast a while ago about, did I call it? Can't remember what I called it. Our temporary states. That's what I called it, temporary states. So yes, chronically elevated mTOR without balance isn't good. We're never in a chronically elevated state of mTOR. That's like saying exercise is bad for you if you do it 24 hours a day, because it raises your heart rate, it increases your blood pressure, it increases cortisol, it increases muscle damage. So exercise is bad for you. Yeah, it is bad for you if you did it 24 hours a day. We don't do it 24 hours a day. So it's a non-issue. So stop. Water is bad for you if you drink it 24 hours a day. It'll kill you. But we don't drink it 24 hours a day. So stop. It's ridiculous. So mTOR without balance is associated with horrible things. But we're not in chronically elevated mTOR, although some people might be. I'll get onto that in a second. So how does protein fit in with mTOR? We now agree that mTOR is a switch. If it's not switched on, you're losing muscle. You are not building muscle if it's got to be turned on. So how does protein fit in? So amino acids from protein activate mTOR. When I say activate, think of the light switch. They turn them on. But so leucine is a certain amino acid which is particularly effective. But there still has to be enough with it. If you're like, well, my peanut butter has got protein in it, it's not going to turn that light switch on. If you're like, well, I got my 11 grams from my yogurt for the day, it's like, it's not turning mTOR on. There has to be enough presence of the amino acid to switch the light switch on, to turn mTOR on. And that is one of my pet peeves where people are like, yeah, I really must eat more protein. It's like, okay, I mean, you really must. This is about doing what is necessary, not doing what you want. Like, well, I train 5 days a week and I really must work on my protein. You're losing. You're losing. Yeah, I'm getting worked up. I'll just calm down just a little bit here. All right. So, amino acids, especially leucine, are particularly effective in activating mTOR, turning that light switch on. Resistance training amplifies this effect. So it's the perfect combination. So this is why protein is so powerful for muscle preservation, but there has to be enough of it. So mTOR, crucial. We don't want it turned on all the time. Who might have it turned on all the time? Again, I'm going back to these bulking scenarios, which I see a few teenagers doing, where they're just eating and eating and eating and eating and eating and eating and eating. Yeah, you're switching mTOR on. That's not good. We can see that's not good. Yeah, you're going to build muscle, but that's not good. The bulking guys, stop it. Stop it. Not good. Now, again, most of the bodybuilders I know, when they did the bulking phase, it was balanced with a cutting phase. What I'm not seeing is, and again, I see a lot of teenage boys doing it, which I love the fact that they're so interested in muscle building, thankfully, but they're just doing the bulking phase and they're not doing the cutting phase because the cutting phase isn't fun. But the bulking phase is mTOR is highly elevated constantly, and it is meant to be balanced with a period of time where mTOR is not elevated, and they're not doing that. Because there are two pathways here. We have mTOR, and then it's counterbalanced naturally by another pathway called AMPK. So again, mTOR, the amino acids in protein, if you have enough of them, if you don't have enough of them, it's not going to work. And resistance training are going to elevate, they're going to switch mTOR on. And mTOR is absolutely essential for muscle protein synthesis. That's one pathway. The opposing pathway is AMPK. And this is the forgotten hero, but this too can be very abused. So AMPK is a separate pathway. It inhibits mTOR. It shuts it off. It turns the light switch off. So what does AMPK do? AMPK is actually the pathway we want to be on for fat loss. So it increases fat oxidation, and AMPK is activated by exercise, especially cardiovascular exercise. It is activated by low carb. It is activated by fasting. It is activated by medications like metformin. So it's a separate pathway, works in different ways. mTOR, resistance training, and protein. AMPK is for fat loss, breaking it down. So one is for building muscle, the other is for the burning fat, and cardiovascular and low carb and fasting and things like that will activate AMPK, two different pathways. The problem was never protein. The problem with mTOR is constant feeding with no movement. That's the problem with mTOR, and you can see how, a lot of people are doing that. AMPK, however, so let me just touch on this for a second. So mTOR, if that pathway is always turned on, I will absolutely agree that is a problem. It was never meant to be turned on all the time. Just as with my examples, AMPK is another pathway, and it is not meant to be turned on all the time. So we know these bulking people, or these people that overeat with no movement, they are overacting mTOR, not good. But also, there's a lot of people that are always in the pathway of AMPK. They're never eating a carbohydrate. They're doing fasting all the time. They're doing cardiovascular exercise all the time because I've got to lose weight. I've got to lose weight. I've got to lose weight. They're terrified of eating a carb. They're terrified of not doing their cardio. Well, that AMPK pathway is also, when you're on it all the time, is problematic. And if you are an AMPK and you're thinking, well, yes, but I'm training and I'm eating my protein and yeah, and I'm going to build muscle. Well, not really, because AMPK inhibits mTOR, it turns it off. So you get this same situation where people stay on that pathway, which a lot of women do, and yet their goal is they'll say, I just want to be told to build some muscle. And it's like, well, how are you going to do that? Now, I'm not being critical here, because why would they know about AMPK and mTOR? Why would they even know about this? They don't. But this is the ladies that get terrified of not doing the cardio. They get terrified of eating the carbohydrate. They get terrified eating calories over whatever their X number is. But that's a problem as well, because they're stuck on the AMPK pathway. And that's going to lead to muscle loss. People become fragile. It's just not good. So again, the unexciting news here, the unexciting headline is balance. We go between the two pathways on a daily basis. You activate mTOR several times a day. You activate AMPK several times a day. This is exactly what I do with the meal plans in Muscle Month. A couple of the meals are there to activate mTOR, and they're timed correctly. That's the other thing. And a couple of meals are, around AMPK. So I'm creating two environments several times a day, every day, allowing a person to actually build muscle and stay lean or get leaner. It is not that difficult, but you have to understand the pathways here. And I'm guessing that the vast majority of you listening to this, you've kind of, your eyes have probably, I don't know, your eyes have probably rolled over, and you're thinking, what the hell is she talking about? Which is why you should come and do a Muscle Month. This is because it's not difficult to do this, but it's that really unexciting balance thing that, doesn't make the headlines. All right. So mTOR, totally criticized, and protein again is demonized because it's part of triggering mTOR. mTOR's not a problem. It's a pathway it's on and we're off it, we're on and we're off it. If we're on it all the time, it's a problem. But obviously, eating all day and not moving is not surprisingly a problem. All right. Well, let's talk about plant-based diets and mTOR. So plant-based diets are typically low in leucine. So leucine is the one, again, I haven't got time to do this on the podcast. Come and do Muscle Month. Okay. So plant-based diets are typically lower in leucine. That does reduce mTOR activation, but it's also, going to reduce muscle mass. It's going to reduce strength. It's going to reduce your metabolic resilience. And muscle, people love muscle because it's cosmetic, right? It looks good, but it is the most protective tissue that we have. It does look pretty as well. Although, when I first started building muscle, nobody wanted it. I was frowned on. People couldn't believe why, as a woman, I wanted to build this muscle. And agreed, I took it a long way. I took it farther than even I wanted to, but muscle is far more than cosmetic. Now, nature already gives mTOR a break. So we've said how you can make some meals low carb. You can do cardiovascular. You can if you go onto the other pathway, AMPK, it will automatically switch mTOR off. But there's other things that can actually temper mTOR's activity, and these are curcumin. There's berberine. Green tea is really good at it. The DIM supplements, or your cruciferous vegetables, caffeine, thankfully, and quercetin, things like onions. These are all natural compounds which temper mTOR activity. So again, the solution isn't avoiding protein, it's timing, balance, and it's food you can eat. So berberine, green tea, have some broccoli, caffeine, have some onions. Very easy to create this balance. So it actually went wrong, and it went really wrong for a long time there. And it was a nightmare for me, and continually in verbal battles with clients and people during that time. So what actually went wrong here? So this is the truth of it. A small amount of legitimate science was absolutely oversimplified, taken out of context, and emotionally weaponized, and this was done deliberately. Now, in many cases, the loudest voices pushing the protein fear were also financially invested in plant-based products. I mean, follow the money there. And, you saw those documentaries, I use that term loosely, and look at who funded them. I'm not going to name names, but look who funded them, and look at the companies they owned. Things like pea protein powder. It doesn't make them evil, but it does make them, it makes their messaging very biased, and they used they used the most powerful marketing tool available, right? Fear. They used fear. Protein was never the enemy. The context was known and ignored. No mention of balance that is very easy to achieve. And fear was, it was weaponized. You have to have the full picture here. So if protein was inherently dangerous, athletes wouldn't thrive, elderly people wouldn't need it, wouldn't need more of it, and muscle wouldn't correlate with longevity, but we absolutely know it does. So if you were confused, hesitant, or fearful, then I hope this helps. I put it into a very short podcast. I probably went too fast on it. I'm sorry, but I hope if all you get from this is, oh, wow, I was duped. And protein really is my friend. And yes, I should eat vegetables with my protein. Maybe, I'll spend, half the day in a fasted state, 12 hours. That's kind of normal anyway. Maybe I'll drink some green tea, make sure I have some vegetables, add some cardio in there as well as my resistance training. Not all my meals have to be high carb. Maybe I'll split that up a little bit. Balance. Not hard. I'm not counting numbers here. I'm just balance. Balance which allows for compliance. And you can see how protein really, it's your best friend here. Protein with resistance training. The resistance training, you have to be specific though, and I'll try and do a podcast on that, but so many people are going to the gym and completely missing. I mean, they're not triggering mTOR, and their workouts are not allowing for muscle adaptation anyway. It's, think of the business that you're in. Think of your place of expertise. And imagine that you're watching, swabs of people doing something that you know a lot about, and they're doing it incorrectly, and they're trying really hard. So now you can maybe understand my frustration, why I rant a little bit. It's soul destroying for me, because this isn't that difficult, but it is a skill. And you have to understand this stuff, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Okay. All right, that's it for now. If that wasn't a sales pitch to join Muscle Month, I don't know what is. And I guess you could put all of this into ChatGPT and you'll be more confused than ever, because, there's a progression to the information, and never underestimate the value of coaching. Nothing is ever going to replace that. And don't ever underestimate the power of being in a small group, that actually lifts you and pulls you through the program. Muscle Month, we start on February the 16th. So now, or you're waiting till at least November, if not next year. Sales pitch over. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Midlife Mayhem. Oh, I should honestly say that Muscle Month, musclemonth.com. Just go to my website, Joanne Lee, or go to musclemonth.com. If you've got any if you've got any questions, I really don't want to hear your problems. No. If you've got any questions, you can email me at Joanne. I do hope you enjoyed this podcast. You can find me all over social. Just search my name, Joanne Lee Cornish. and of course my website, joannelee.com. Be sure to check out what program I have got right now. I'm sure to be running something. And remember, you can always contact me, joanne@joannelee.com. Until next time.